His is something that happened when I was in high school. I think I was about 15 years old, and I remember that I was home by myself one night. My parents went out somewhere I really don't remember, and my brother must have been gone someplace too. I'm not sure where everybody was, but I just know that I was by myself. We had a dog back then whose name was Thomas, and he was home with me. I was doing my homework up in my room after my parents left. I remember I was up there for a while and then came down at probably 8 or so to get something to eat. When I did, I was in the kitchen and Thomas needed to go out, so I let him out in the backyard. Our house was 2 stories and about average size, and it had a backyard of about a half an acre that was fenced in. There were a few trees around there, but overall it was a good amount of space for Thomas to run around. He would usually go outside and do his business and then run around for a while and then go by the door when he wanted to be let back in. So I remember that after a while, I let him back in and then I went back upstairs. I returned to my homework, which would always take me a long time to do. I was pretty good at school and always had good grades, but homework would always take me forever. So maybe 30 minutes later, as I was still up there, I heard the back door to the house open. My first thought was that my parents or brother had returned home. They would never enter through the back door, but I thought that maybe they had already arrived back and I just hadn't heard them enter through the front door. I had been pretty preoccupied with my stuff, so maybe I hadn't realized. I decided to go downstairs at this point. So I got up from my desk, left my bedroom, and then headed down the staircase. The stairs at our house went down towards the back of the house, between the dining room and back living room area. I made it literally 2 steps down the stairs when I saw someone down in the dining room. It was a man, but nobody that I knew. I instantly turned around and went back upstairs. I quickly ran back to my bedroom, went inside, and locked the door. I had just recently got his cell phone, however, I had left it downstairs. Thomas had not barked at all, which was kind of strange, but overall, he was a pretty quiet dog and wouldn't always bark at strangers. I didn't know what I could do, so I tried to stay hidden in my bedroom. At first, I heard nothing from the intruder. I couldn't hardly hear anything from downstairs unless it was really loud though, like a door opening or closing. However, about 5 minutes later or so, I heard the man coming up the stairs. That's when things got intense. I was really nervous, and I literally hid underneath my bed. As the footsteps went down the hallway, they approached my room. They did not immediately go to it, but I heard another door being opened. Things were quiet for a while, and then I heard the footsteps again. I was kicking myself for forgetting my cell phone downstairs, or else I could have called the cops. The footsteps then made their way to right outside my door before the intruder turned the handle. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. He seemed to stay at the door for a few more seconds, which felt like a really long time. Then he walked further down the hallway. I heard another door open, and I thought about making a run for it, but ultimately chickened out. The man went in another room for a little while. Then I finally heard him walking away down the hallway. Soon after, he went back down the stairs. I felt a little better, but I was still too scared to come out from under my bed, and I was way too scared to leave my bedroom. I had no idea if he had left the house or was still in it, because I couldn't hear much downstairs. And hiding under my bed, I heard even less. More time went by and things remained quiet. Finally, I got up. I still couldn't leave my bedroom though. My parents got home a little while later, and I finally left my bedroom at that point and ran downstairs. I told them about it and the police were called, but the man was gone. He must have quietly left at some point. The cops searched up and down, and other than the back door still being unlocked, there was no sign of him even being there. Nothing was stolen or out of place. It was really weird. I'm not sure if the man ever saw me or knew that I was there, because when I saw him, he wasn't looking at me, and I'm not sure why he entered our house. But I'm just glad that he left and that my door had a lock on it. This is something that happened not too long ago. I live alone in a smaller house that I'm renting. It's in what I would describe as a pretty average neighborhood. I've lived here for a little over a year, and I've gotten used to things. So, one night it was getting late and I was about to go to bed. The time was about 10, and I went upstairs to where my bedroom is. All the lights in the house were off, and I literally just crawled into bed to sleep. But before I could close my eyes, though, I heard a knock at my front door. This was instantly weird. Why would somebody be at the door so late at night? I didn't know. So I got up out of bed, annoyed, and walked down the stairs, and then went over to the front door. It took a little while to get down there, obviously, but when I did, there was nobody there. I was confused and looked out the window into my front yard, driveway, and the street. There was nobody in sight, so I figured that either whoever knocked had lost patience waiting for me pretty quick, or else maybe it was a prank. Possibly some kids playing ding-dong ditch. I was annoyed by the whole thing, but I went up to my bedroom to finally go to sleep now. However, literally as soon as I was about to get into bed again, there was more knocking at the front door. At this point, I was convinced that it had to be a prank. The timing seemed too perfect. So I sprinted downstairs and then went over to the front door again. Once more, they were gone. Whoever had knocked was nowhere in sight. This time, I decided to wait around for a bit and see if whoever was there would return. So I stayed by the window, but tried to keep myself hidden. As I waited, I was expecting to see someone return to my property, probably some teenage kid or something, but nobody came back. I stayed there watching for like 15 minutes and then decided to go to sleep. I figured that they would not come back, and I went up and went to bed. This time, I was actually able to fall asleep. However, I was woken up in the night. It was 2 a.m, and as soon as I awoke, I heard the sound of someone banging on my front door. Not just knocking like it was before, but this time it was like the person was trying to knock my door down. And it wasn't just one steady set of knocking, it was almost constant banging. I got up out of bed and this time felt nervous to go down and see who was there based on the loud bangs. But still, I went down the stairs to look. When I was just about at the bottom of the stairs, they stopped. And by the time I got there, once again, the person was gone. There was nobody there. I stayed by the window and looked around. I could not believe how I kept missing this person, whoever they were. As I stayed there, though, about a minute later, I saw a car slowly drive by down my street. It was a pretty average-looking sedan, and there was nothing that stood out about it. Plus, I could not see anything about the driver because of it being nighttime and dark out. But the car drove by really slow and then was out of sight. And my street is normally very quiet, especially at that time of night. So, I think that was the person who was knocking on my door, but obviously I can't confirm that. After that, I stayed by the window a little while longer and then eventually went back upstairs and went to sleep. I was not woken up again that night by knocking or anything. And the next day, things were fine. That was a few weeks ago and nothing strange has happened since. But I still have many questions about that. Who was knocking on my door and why? It was so crazy how I kept missing them and never saw who did it. It's like they knew when I was going downstairs and maybe they could hear me with it being so late. I'm not sure, but I'm wondering if that car that drove by was in fact the culprit. I'm hoping that it was just somebody pulling a prank on me and it's an innocent joke. But the fact that they knocked twice at 10 and then came back 4 hours later at 2 a.m. is really creepy. Plus, the way they were banging on my door that last time was really bad, and I seriously wondered if they were trying to break in. I'm wondering if this person will come back. I'm hoping not, but I will keep you posted. This is something that happened at the last apartment building that I lived in. Overall, it was a pretty nice place. The building was fairly new, and it wasn't super cheap or anything. I liked living there for the most part. It wasn't perfect, but it was still pretty good. The apartment complex consisted of 3 buildings. 2 were right across from each other, and then the third was next to the first building. Running between all the buildings was a parking lot, and then there were sidewalks going all around the property. Surrounding the property were a few residential roads on one end, and then some commercial businesses on the other. Each building had 4 floors to it. So overall, the apartment complex was pretty average. So one evening, I was at home by myself and had recently gotten home from work. I think it was probably like 7 p.m. or so, and it was dark out by now. I got a call on my cell phone from a number that was in the same city as me, but the person was not in my contacts list. When I answered it, it was a woman's voice, and she said that there was a package for me in the mailroom. She said that she was one of the managers of the apartment complex, and she was letting me know that the package had been there for a couple of days, and maybe I didn't know about it, and I should come and pick it up now. I was not aware that there was a package for me there. So I said, "Thanks for letting me know." In fact, I hadn't ordered anything in a while, so I wasn't really sure what it could be. She asked me if I was home right now, and I said yes, and then she said that I should come down right now and get it. So I said that I would. Then we hung up, and I got my shoes on and left the apartment. My place was on the 3rd floor, so I walked down to the elevator and then got in it and took it down to the 1st floor. The mailroom in my building was inside the lobby but outside of the locking doors. Inside the first set of doors when you entered the building, but to the left of the second set of doors, was a small room for package deliveries. It was accessible to delivery drivers and DoorDash people that way, but it also meant that people could potentially steal the packages. However, I had never had a problem with that. So I walked off the elevator through the empty and quiet lobby, and then went out the first set of doors. Then I turned and entered the small mailroom, and there was nobody else in the mailroom. There were a number of packages lying around though. Many people would take forever to pick up their packages and probably didn't even know that they were there. So there was always like 10 or 20 boxes just sitting around on the ground or on the shelves. I looked around and picked up every single package and looked at the name, but there wasn't any that were for me. I was confused. In the time that I was there looking, I remember hearing the doors from the outside open, and I glanced over to see 2 large men enter the building, but they did not go in the second set of doors. Instead, they just stopped and stood around by the second set of doors, indicating that they did not live there. My thought was that they were waiting for somebody to come down and let them in. I just continued to look for my package. I literally picked up every single box in the mailroom twice and read every single name, but there was nothing for me. I was so confused now. I even opened up my small mailbox that was also in the room, but that too was empty. Why had this woman called me and told me to get my package now? I know that she had told me it was in the mailroom. Had she also called the other 20 or so people who had packages in the mailroom as well? And now it wasn't even there. Also, it was past business hours in the apartment offices, which closed at 5 p.m. So it was strange that she was calling me after hours for this as well. I had the idea that maybe she took the package to the office, although it seemed like a long shot, or maybe she had mixed me up with somebody else and called the wrong number. I didn't even know who this woman was. I had only briefly met one staff member of the apartment complex when I picked up my keys moving in long before this. So anyways, I decided to go back in the building. But now I had another dilemma. These 2 large men were still just standing by the doors and had been there for like 2 or 3 minutes now, as I had been aimlessly searching around for my non-existent package. I didn't want to be the one to let them in, but as I walked over, figured I had no choice. We were not supposed to let people in the building unless we knew them, obviously. So I would prefer that whoever they were waiting for would let them in. As I made it to the lobby, I had the thought to just leave the building and then walk around and enter through a side door. But I told myself, no, don't be weird like that. Just go in. So I walked over and unlocked the door with my key fob, but I was not going to hold the door open for these guys or anything. Hopefully they would be nice and not go in, but wait for their friend or whoever. As I walked past them, they said nothing. When I opened the now unlocked door, I heard them instantly start to quickly walk towards me. Before the door was even starting to close, one of the men grabbed it in a borderline aggressive fashion. They basically barged in right behind me and didn't say anything still. It kind of ticked me off, but I just ignored it and started walking into the lobby. The 2 men followed. I turned to the right and decided not to use the elevator. If these men were going upstairs, that would be really awkward. So I turned to the right to take the hallway down to the stair. But when I turned right, the men did as well, going right past the obvious elevator. So now either A, they were going to a room over here, B, they just wanted to take the stairs for whatever reason, or C, they were following me. I hoped that it was not C. I walked down the hallway until I reached the doors to the stairwell. When I entered them soon after, the men did as well. They were walking maybe 10 feet behind me. By this point, I was really nervous, so I decided to just leave the building. Before turning to go up the stairs, there's an exit door, which is a side door to the building. As I walked, instead of going past it, I just opened the door and left. When I did, unbelievably, both men left the building as well. Now I knew that they were both following me, and I had no clue who these guys were. Basically, just out of instincts and a reaction, I just took off running. I sprinted down the sidewalk, heading towards the now back side of the building. I made it to the corner, and now heard both of the two men starting to sprint after me. I'm pretty fast, so I had that going for me. I just hoped that I was faster than these two men. After getting around the corner, I sprinted along the quiet back sidewalk of the apartment complex. I ran the entire stretch of it and felt like I had put a little distance between myself and the men. But I didn't slow down. I turned to the left and now sprinted back along the side of my building. There was another side door there. When I reached that side door, I very quickly slowed down. At that moment, the two men chasing me were now just reaching the corner. I knew that I had one shot to unlock the door, and I quickly took out my key fob and put it up to the door. Thankfully, it unlocked. I very quickly opened the door as I heard the men running towards me and quickly getting closer. I went inside and then made sure to slam the door shut behind me and it would automatically lock. When I did, I still heard the men approach. Then I turned and started running for the staircase in that stairwell, which was the same thing as the other side of the building, just opposite. As I went to the stairs, the men reached the door, and I heard them trying to open it, but they couldn't get in. Then they started banging on the door as I ran up the stairs. I didn't stop running until I got up to the third floor, and only then did I feel much better and started to calm down. I walked back to my apartment and went inside. Then I thought about the whole situation, and I realized the phone call was probably a setup. I called the cops on the guys and reported them, but when the police got there, the men were gone. They looked around, but could not find them. The next day, I went to the apartment offices and met the managers. The woman who called me was not someone who worked there, so she was in fact just trying to get me downstairs. It was all a setup. I don't know who she was or who those men were, and I don't know what they wanted either, but I thankfully never saw them again. When my lease was up, I moved, and I now live in a different apartment in a different city. But I will never forget that crazy experience. Back when I was in high school, I lived at home with my parents and siblings. However, one night my brother and my sister were over at their friends' houses. I had friends too, but I wasn't hanging out with them on this night. My parents went out with their friends as well, so I was all alone at home for the occasion. I was a freshman at the time and was too young to drive, unlike my two older siblings. I had stayed at home alone several times before, and I enjoyed it. It was nice to have the entire house to myself for a change, and usually I would just play video games though. So on this night, I remember that's what I was doing. I was up in my bedroom and playing on my PlayStation. My bedroom, along with everybody else's, was on the second floor of the house. The way my room was situated was that it was at the back side of the house and had a window that overlooked our backyard. In my room, the bed was against the wall, and then across from it was my desk and my TV. Then in the corner was my closet, which was next to the window. So I was in there just gaming. And at one point, probably